Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of our Colorado series. Today we're going to be expanding out farther north and creating two distinct suburbs of our city. The first one is going to be nestled in on the hill directly north. Then we will create another suburb, which will be more of a self-contained neighborhood within the city, which has its own downtown main street, highway connection, and city services. I'm really excited to get started on expanding our city so it fits much more naturally within the environment. I think it will really bring the whole area to life. If you're enjoying the series and want to see more, make sure to leave a like and a comment down below. It really helps to push my videos to new viewers and keep me tapped into what you all are enjoying. So, without further ado, let's get started. So here is the road layout for the first neighborhood we're going to be working with here. I really wanted to keep this hill. It's definitely more challenging to work with the existing terrain instead of flattening it out, but I think this is really going to help to give the city that dynamic verticality that really helps it have that natural, realistic look that we're going for. The entire time I was building this district, I just had city planner plays stuck in my head telling me, respect the topography, and he's definitely right in that regard. There were three main things I was thinking about: respect the topography, roads don't end, they lead somewhere, and basic road hierarchy. You can see how the roads conform to the terrain instead of going against it. Any existing roads I had in the area are being expanded upon and are leading off in other directions for further expansion. I already had a decent road hierarchy to work off of from the rest of the city, but I'm still using several layers of hierarchy. For the 4-lane roads, I switched to the highway road, as this isn't the sort of area that's built around walkability, at least not for the arterials. Then I switched to the regular 2-lane road for some connectors, and then the custom neighborhood road I have for the local roads. I think this achieved a really natural look for the area, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. You can see I'm using the UK pack for these larger lots here. I wanted to give off the vibe that this neighborhood is quite expensive and sought after. It's in a really scenic location with great views of the mountains and also great proximity to downtown and the surrounding areas. For the smaller lots, I'm using the US Southwest assets. I just really love these assets, and I think they're perfect for the vibe we're trying to achieve in this city. I know at some point I'm going to have to start using some other packs to give a little bit more asset diversity. I definitely don't want things looking too samey throughout this whole region. These assets are just too good to pass up though for the moment. Hopefully here soon we'll get some new assets with the DLC that's coming out, or maybe they'll get custom assets in the game here soon. Right now I'm just going through and placing all of the buildings. We are going to do several passes of detailing, however. Once all the houses are placed, I'll go through and use some surfaces to make the ground a little more varied. I'll place some trees to give this neighborhood that older look I'm going for, and maybe cover up some of the rougher terrain. Then I'll go through and see where I can change some of the surfaces on the roads just to give them a little bit more diversity and kind of tie them into the rest of the road surfaces that we've been doing throughout the rest of the city. I really hope you guys are enjoying this build just as much as I am. I'm really enjoying this city and how it's turning out. It's looking really, really good, and it's been so fun to put together. I've been really enjoying all of your guys' comments and suggestions and all of the engagement that I've been getting on this series. If I haven't used one of your suggestions yet, it might be because I'm planning on using it somewhere else in the region. I've got a notepad where I'm putting down everybody's suggestions that ever I read through, and I've got pretty extensive plans for the next 5 to 10 episodes. So I'm definitely holding some of those suggestions for later for certain towns and certain areas and stuff that I think will fit those names really well. So definitely stay tuned, and I might just use your suggestion here in the next couple episodes. For right now, I'm just going to leave you all with a little bit of music while I finish off the rest of this neighborhood, and I will be back here soon for a live play. All right, so here we are in the first time lapse here of this video. So I just got done with this neighborhood here that's nestled on top of this hill. Like I've said before, I really wanted to keep this hill here, and I'm really glad that I did because it just gives a little bit of verticality to this area that's really nice. I love that it all conforms to the terrain and in such a nice way, and I'm really liking the configuration that we have at the moment here. So for the most part, I just placed US Southwest assets for the smaller lots, and then for the larger lots, I placed the UK assets. And I feel like they blend really well together in a lot of these areas. They kind of have similar looks to them, although they're a little bit different in style, obviously, coming from different packs and different regions of the world and whatnot. But I think they're congruent enough that they look pretty good when it comes to the full picture of everything. We lined these streets here with some just more suburban commercial buildings, something that has like lots of parking lots and has, you know, strip malls and things like that. So just to give that gradient a little bit more of time to slope down into our neighborhood here. And, you know, we don't really want to add houses onto this main street here. Nobody really wants to live in a house right here on a big 4-lane road, at least not a single family house like this. So given all that, the next step is to get this flat area here filled out. So I want to do a sort of standalone town here. It's going to be part of the major city area, but it's going to have its own little downtown main street, and then it's going to have some houses and stuff surrounding it. I'm going to have, you know, a couple of nice little assets, try to sell a little bit more of that Midwestern small town vibe in this sort of area here. It's going to be a mining town, so we're going to have a quarry in here, and I think it's going to turn out really nice. I'm going to have to start out by getting a highway intersection here, so that's what we're going to start with, so we can make sure we're handling all the traffic that wants to come in through here, and maybe instead of having to drive all the way through the city, they can hop on this intersection here and then get off somewhere around here so they can get to the city. So we're going to get started on that now. So I will see you all in the time lapse. So as you can see here, we're just getting started with the initial road layout for this area. Like I said, it is going to be sort of a self-contained town, a self-contained little neighborhood on the edge of the city here. We're just going to get a main street flowing through the middle there, which is just a extension of one of our main streets that we had in the downtown. We're going to connect this other main street here, which is serving as a little bit of a service road right here next to the highway, which I really like. I think it's very functional, and it's going to help us out a little bit with this intersection. So you see I had the intersections for going north and then also getting on the highway going north, or getting on the highway going north and getting off the highway going north. So now we have to manage our south connections, which I'm going to be doing up here on the service road. I don't want to have any bridges, and I don't want to have any tunnels because it just seems kind of unnecessary for a section like this. Maybe if the city gets bigger and more populated and stuff, we'll go back and change it. But for right now, we've got this little overpass here, which is really convenient next to the service road, and we're just creating just a little bit of an intersection. We're going to have an on-ramp and an off-ramp, which is all going to be connected by this little bit of a roundabout, which we're about to put in here. So it's not quite as deadly, because right now this is really scary. But the roundabout is going to force them to slow down a bit. It's still going to be a little bit sketchy, a little bit of a classic American death trap, but I'm going through and putting these do not enter signs and making it very obvious for the drivers which way they're going to be going, at least I hope. So hopefully, you know, that helps out a little bit. Right now we're just upgrading this to the street with the grassy median. I've really been liking these grassy medians, especially for our more prominent main streets in the area. Just adds a little bit more visual interest. So this area is mainly going to be a grid. We have a lot of really windy roads on the hill, which we had to if we wanted to conform to the terrain. So I want to balance that out because we have the downtown, which is a very strict grid, and then it is almost immediately broken up by that hill. I want to continue that grid through here so it balances itself out over time. And as you can see here, I'm trying my best to give this little section its own road hierarchy. So we have the 4-lane main street going through the middle, and then we're going to have just the regular 2-lane roads that are going to kind of connect up all of these blocks here. And then we've got some alleyways for the more commercial areas, and then I'm using, once again, the neighborhood road for some of these more suburban areas that are on the outskirts of this little city here. We're we're doing a couple of little curves and stuff like that. You know, you don't want it to be too strict, especially considering you have to conform to the shape of this terrain here. You don't want things to look too non-organic, you know. So we're doing a couple of little curves here just to keep it nice and organic looking, but for the most part it's based off of a pretty strict grid. Here now we're just going through and placing these cul-de-sacs on the endpoints of each of these roads. I feel like it makes the endpoints look a lot more natural, and also we're going to be having suburbs on all of these cul-de-sacs anyways, so it's going to look a lot more natural once we get all of the houses placed in here. Now we're just starting out with this little main street area though. I'm using some of these UK buildings. Some of these mixed-use UK buildings just look really nice. I've used them a little bit in Angler Creek, and I use them in my snow build as well. I really like the look of them for these small town main streets. I think they have a really nice vibe to them. And then for the most part, we're just filling it in with more of those southwest assets and the northeast assets. Here now, we're just creating a little bit of an alleyway here. I didn't see us putting a lot of green space behind here. So we're going through with an alley. We're gonna have to do a little bit of detailing. I'm just gonna have a little fake parking lot back there, which I'll place some cars in, and then we'll have some trash cans. I've got these assets now, which I should have downloaded a long time ago, but I've got them now where they're the open trash cans, or they've got filled up with bags and stuff like that. And then it also adds the little trash bag props and stuff like that, which I really like. It has a natural feel to it whenever these things are actually being used and they're not just closed shut and you can't see any trash in there and everything. Now we're just having a little gas station and a strip mall. I wanted to give this a sharp drop off, almost like we did in Angler way back then. So we have like a little small historical main street, and then almost immediately it drops off into these strip malls and gas stations and just classic suburban hell that we have here in America sometimes. I feel like it really sells the look that this is definitely a suburb of the city. We're definitely getting farther outside of the city now. In reality, it's not that far away, but we are working with a much smaller scale here, and at the same time we do have a sort of a geographical blocker here with that hill. So there's a little bit of something in between the two areas. So it sort of serves to make this town look a little bit farther away than it actually is, having that geographical blocker in between this town and the downtown. So I'm just trying to sell the look that this is definitely farther off and more of a suburb than the rest of the city that we built so far. Now we're just doing that sharp drop off right behind the main street. We've got some single family homes, and I really like this look for this small little town here. If you've ever been to a small town in America, you'll know that you'll see this a lot. You'll just have neighborhoods right behind the main street, and it'll just be this tiny main street. You might have like a little breakfast, lunch, diner, and some random little shops and stuff like that. Maybe somebody has like a clothing store or something random like that, and then right behind it is just homes. We're doing a little bit of a surface work just to make this surface look a little bit more unique and a little bit more worn down. A lot of these areas probably aren't getting super crazy landscaping. They're probably not getting like watered all the time. I'm trying to keep those surfaces in areas where it makes sense. So I'm trying to avoid some of the front lawns, because a lot of the times people will take a little bit better care of their front lawns than they do, the back or just like the sides of the house. That's not really in somebody's lawn, but it's just kind of, outside of somebody's plot. So we're keeping sort of an eye on that, on where we're placing the lower quality grass. There's more dirt and stuff like that going in between it and all, and then having some of the higher quality grass in the lawns. I'm still going through and removing the vanilla grass surfaces on these lawns, because I just don't really like the vanilla grass surface, and I feel like you get a much more natural and realistic look whenever you remove those grass surfaces and then go in and make it a little bit more worn outside of the lawns. I think that ends up having a much nicer and more realistic gradient than just having these really like plastic looking lawns that the vanilla grass kind of gives you. Here we're just doing a little bit of a school. This is kind of a weird shaped lot, so I wanted to do some sort of service building to make it fit into its lot much more naturally. Then we're gonna go through and place a police station, a medical clinic, and a fire station here in a moment. But we're getting pretty close to the next live play, so I will leave you guys with the rest of this little time lapse for about 30 seconds, and I will be back here soon for the live play, where I'll show you all in a much slower fashion. So now that we've got a little bit of a start on our small town, I just wanted to slow down and show everybody what we've gotten going on. So I wanted to make the historic Main Street pretty small. I wanted it to just take up this little section here of the city, and then very quickly afterwards I wanted to move on to these strip malls and gas stations and little commercial buildings and stuff like that, to try to sell the aspect that this is like very much just a small offshoot town that isn't really seeing a whole lot of urban development or anything like that. It's just kind of a suburb, and so that's sort of what I was going for here. And yes, we do have two gas stations across the street from each other, which if you've ever been to America is very realistic for some reason. I'm not sure why we do that so often. But I've just started on a little bit of the suburbs here. I'm going to start using the find it random hotkey that some of you have pointed out in the comments that I can use. Up until this point, I haven't really remembered that I can turn that on, but I'm going to turn that on here soon whenever we finish the rest of these suburbs. But we're going to finish up a little bit more commercial buildings here on the main street, and then we might put a couple buildings here over next to the highway, you know, maybe like a supermarket or something like that. I feel like that's something you see very often in these small offshoot towns, is you'll have an exit onto the highway here, and you'll just have like a supermarket like right next to the highway. And so I kind of want to see if I can replicate that with some of the assets that we have in the game. So we'll see. Other than that, I've just got this little elementary school here. I tried my best to make this fit the lot really nicely. With this weird sort of lot that we have here, it was either going to be sort of a park or it was going to be a service building. And I thought having a elementary school that's pretty much specifically designed for the residents here in this town, and then maybe some of the residents in Oak Hills might go to this neighborhood, or might go to this elementary school, or they might go to one of the other elementary schools that we have in the city. It might just depend on you know, where they live, and maybe if they're closer over here, they'll be in this school district, but if they're over here, they might be in this school district. And we were able to do this highway intersection pretty nicely. So two rules that I wanted to have for the highway intersection is that I didn't want to have any bridges, and I didn't want to have any tunnels. I wanted this to be all just ground level with the existing terrain, because it just didn't seem to make much sense to have, you know, super complicated infrastructure for this little offshoot town. So what I ended up having to do is I have these two roads here, so you can get on the highway or you can get off the highway going north. But going south, we have this little thing here, which may not be the safest solution possible, but it's not always, you're not always going to find the safest solution possible in real life a lot of the times. So I think maybe this adds a little bit of realism here, just a classic death trap. You got to slow down super hard on this slope here, which, you know, if it's icy, might be a little bit challenging. But, you know, luckily right now it's summertime, and, you know, it's nice and warm, and the brakes are working good. We've just got this here, so you can go on and you can take the roundabout and hop on the highway going south, or you can get off here, and that's pretty much it, if I'm remembering correctly. I feel like highway interchanges are always a little bit challenging for me. Trying to make them aesthetically pleasing and trying to make them functional and not super dangerous or not super unrealistic. I feel like I achieved a really good balance here of realism and aesthetics. I feel like it is not a very elegant solution aesthetically, in my opinion. And so I'm really happy with how this turned out. We've got this service road here. So we have the main street going through the downtown here, which, like I was talking about earlier, roads lead somewhere. So we have this main street here, and it cuts through the neighborhoods, and then it becomes a service road that leads to our highway connections. So I really liked how that turned out, how we were able to keep this street going. Similarly, with this main street here, I had it turn off here and then become this main street that leads through our offshoot town. And so I'm really happy with how all of those roads turned out. Let's get back into the time lapse and finish off this neighborhood. So as you can see here, I'm finally using the select random hotkey in Find It, which I wouldn't want to use this for every solution, but for things like these suburbs here where I'm specifically filtering what lot width, what lot depth I have, what packs I want to use and stuff like that. It ends up being pretty handy because I've already got a selection of buildings where, 95% of the buildings in this little selection here are ones that I want to use. So it ends up being really convenient. I don't have to constantly move my mouse, back and forth from the find it menu all the way to where I want to place it. And it just makes it, a lot quicker of a process to get these suburbs placed down. I still find this to be a better solution than zoning because you can have a lot more fine control over where you place the buildings, and also you still have a decent amount of fine control over what buildings are being placed. If you select random hotkey and it's not exactly the building that you were thinking of, you can always just press it again and it'll give you something new. So it ends up just being a much more efficient solution for placing down these suburbs. And I really appreciate you guys for letting me know in the comments about that. And now I should be able to make suburbs a lot quicker, a lot easier now. Now we're just going through with a couple more of our layers. We're going to be removing the surfaces for these grass that we were talking about, the grass that pops up in these little neighborhoods and stuff. And then we're going to be placing some trees and just doing a little bit of detailing for some of the back lots of these commercial buildings, placing some parking lots. Parking lots, I still feel like pound for pound, some of the best detailing you can do for an American build. It just adds so much realism and so much life to an area. Whenever you try to chalk a block full of buildings and don't add any parking, it just doesn't quite look like an American city. I'm sure if you were doing, a European city, or you were doing a city from somewhere else in the world where individual cars just aren't as common, then it would make sense for you to want to fill up a lot more of those blocks with buildings and parks and, areas where people can walk, or maybe bike lanes, for people to ride their bikes and stuff like that. But for the purposes of what we're building here, people are going to be driving in this city. This city is based off of Colorado. It's not even based off of a big city in Colorado, Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs is, a fairly large city in Colorado, but in comparison to the world, it's not that big of a city. And there is a lot of car dependent infrastructure, as there is in most parts of the US. So it ends up being that if you want to make a realistic city in City Skylines, finding a region or a city which you want to draw inspiration from, and then basing a lot of your decisions based off of what you see on Google Earth, is going to help you a lot in creating that realistic city. Right now we're just doing a little bit of a supermarket here that's right off of the highway. I really like this little addition to the city. If you've ever been to a smaller American city, you'll know that it's pretty often that you'll find these supermarkets that are right next to the highway. So I wanted to add that little bit of realism into the town, and it is a Morrissey's, so it's the UK asset, but I think it fits really nicely for just, some random supermarket. At this point, we're just finishing off more of these suburbs. I'm kind of darting around a bit just randomly throughout this build. Sometimes I like to do that. I'll work on the suburbs for a bit, and then I'll work on some commercial buildings, and then I'll go off in another direction and do this, and then come back to the suburbs later. And sometimes that's just how I end up building, and I don't really try to restrict myself too much whenever I'm building, because I'm mainly just trying to enjoy myself and just do something that feels natural to me. Right now we're just working on a little bit of a quarry here. The idea of the lore for why this town sprung up was that it is a mining town. And so I'm putting this little ore mine in here, and I didn't even look on the info screen if there was even ore here. So hopefully there is ore here, and then this will be productive. Otherwise, it's just going to be sort of a little bit of a cosmetic piece. But I hope that it adds to the simulation a bit, and maybe we get some ore production that'll help out our economy a bit. But right now, I'm just doing, more surface work and stuff, as you can see on the screen. I'm doing a little bit of surface work for the actual quarry because as it stands, it's really hard to see the elevation differences whenever the texture is exactly the same all the way through. So I decided to do a separate texture for the bottom of the quarry here. And then I also have another texture for the top area. And so with the separation in textures, it makes the elevation difference much more pronounced looking, which I really enjoyed that effect. It turned out really nicely, so I'm glad that I was able to have the textures that I needed to do that effect, and that it turned out so nicely. Now we're just doing some rubble, and I'm trying to blend in the rubble with some rocks as well. I'm trying to not make it look too irregular or sparse or anything like that. I just wanted to give, you know, a little bit more of a sort of 3D detailing to this quarry, so it's not all just the terrain that's doing all the work. That, you know, we have some detail and stuff going through in this quarry as well. So we're just, as you can see, just placing some rocks and stuff around the rubble, and then maybe placing some rocks just randomly. I'm trying to lower them in the ground here so they're -1 meter into the ground, which, you know, helps them sort of stick to the surface a little bit better and not stand out so much. I'm not sure if this is 100% realistic for how quarries look, but I just wanted to get something that looked nice whenever you pan your camera over to it, and it just has a little bit more detail and it's a little bit less vanilla. We're about to be into the next live play though, so I will see you all here soon. And that concludes today's build. I'm really loving how our city is looking now that we've got some more expansion. We've got the suburbs in this small little town, just that classic American sprawl that's really making this city look a lot more seated into its environment, a lot more realistic and natural. I'm really loving how this corner turned out here. We've got the quarry on the left, which I think is looking super good. It's a really good standout piece for this town here, kind of setting up the history of the town, why it sprung up here, why there's like a little separate downtown here, because a lot of businesses, I'm sure, moved in here because of the quarry and they were processing and everything like that. Now the quarry might not be having as much of its operations here in town, but there's still some remnants, you know, maybe they're still digging a little bit. I'm loving this supermarket here that we've got on the right. It just looks really natural and really realistic, being right next up to the highway with the water tower next to it. The water tower was kind of a last minute addition. I wasn't actually planning on putting a water tower here, but once I had everything put down, I was like, oh yeah, this town needs a water tower. It just seems to make sense, you know, for a little offshoot small town here. The highway is looking super nice. I love how it goes, you know, over the natural terrain and kind of winds between these hills and whatnot. I love that the neighborhood here on the hill just conforms to the terrain so perfectly to where we can kind of intertwine the natural scenery with the city. And I'm loving this intersection that we have here. I think it's looking really, really nice. I think it's a really good solution for what we are going for. We just have the classic commercial strip that I talked about here on the main street of the city. We've got a little police station, a little fire station, and a medical clinic. And then I also added this Cinevista here, which I love this asset. This asset, I feel like it fits like perfectly here. It's just got this really good aesthetic of just a small town dollar theater that you would see in a town like this. And I'm just really, really loving the look of that right here next to our supermarket and our quarry and whatnot. I got the glasses on the water tower. You know, you had to. It's just necessary at this point. I couldn't imagine putting that water tower down without the glasses. Other than that, though, it's just suburbs here, and I'm really happy with the proportions that we got here with just the main street and then the suburbs surrounding it. I'm really liking how this is more of a grid, and so it kind of balances out how we have some really, really curvy roads here on the hill to match the terrain of the hill, and then we have a really strict grid for the downtown. And having a grid on either side of these hills kind of balances out the composition of the roads, in my opinion. And I'm thinking it's looking really, really nice, and I'm really glad with how everything turned out. So there's some things that I'd like to get squared away before we end this episode, however, and that is going to be for the naming of these new areas. So I got a really good suggestion from Carson1084, which I put their comment here on the screen, and they gave me a lot of really good names, which I've got down in my notepad, which I'm trying to plan on seeing where those names fit, because I really like a lot of those suggestions, but one of them I think we can use right here, and it's going to be Copperdale. I want to name this district Copperdale. So I feel like it really ties into the mining roots in this area. This is a ore mine, and you know, maybe they were involved in the production or mining of copper, and it just kind of has that small town vibe to the name too. So I'm really enjoying that name, and I think it's a perfect name for this little town here. I went ahead and named this neighborhood Oak Hills, which is kind of like I think it's a nice name, but we could definitely have some room to change it if we wanted to. Basically, it's on a hill, and I placed a lot of oak trees, so I named it Oak Hills. So that's what I've got going for that neighborhood there. And then I got one other suggestion from Rectangle Head, which I put on the screen here, which I really, really like. And what their suggestion was to name the northeast side Tower Hill. I really like that name. I think it's nice. And then the northwest side Clementine, which I think is quite a nice name as well. It fits into the lemon theme, the citrus theme. So now we've got some really fitting names for our neighborhoods in our city. The only one that's left is the east side. So definitely put your suggestions down in the comments if you have any ideas for this east side neighborhood. And maybe we can get that name to the next episode. But that is going to conclude the episode for today. So I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you liked the video, I would appreciate a like. And if you want to see more, consider subscribing. And I will see you all in the next one. Have a good one, everybody.